Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We're back again with more Gamedec, and this time I want to ask the question, is Gamedec an inclusive game? Before we get down to business, let me clarify the twofold reason for this series. Reason number one is I want to create a space for rational dialogue regarding how the video game industry handles representation. I see a lot of this game is awful because of pandering, or this game is trash because it does not have a black leading character. I don't think either line of thought is particularly helpful. The second reason I started this series is I want to help empower consumers to decide whether or not a particular game is worth spending their money on. There are some games I have played where black people were treated poorly, and I wish I knew that before I gave the developer my money. There are other games I played on discount long after they came out, where if I had known how well diversity was handled, I would have paid $60 on release day. Keep in mind, I will always make this a separate video from the actual game review because I do not believe it is fair to judge a game's overall quality by how it handles diversity. It certainly might impact how much certain groups enjoy the game, but I do not want to muddy that conversation with points about graphics, quest structure, and combat mechanics. I will leave a link to my Gamedec review in the description below. One final note before we get started. The groups considered in our inclusion videos will change based upon the type of game we are covering. If we are talking about Ghost of Tsushima, then of course it makes sense to consider the Japanese community. However, if we are talking about Mass Effect, then the Japanese community may or may not be a group whose perspective I would consider for this type of content. Hopefully all of that makes sense. Let's get back to the question, is Gamedec an inclusive game? Right off the bat, I'll say this is a mixed bag. There are definitely some areas of the game where I think representation was handled very well, but there are some equally strong missteps in my opinion. Let's start in a good place that also happens to be where the game begins, the character creation screen. Gamedec has no manual character creation, but there are 18 different portraits you can choose from to decide how your character will look in the game. During conversations, the camera does not focus on your face. Instead, the portrait you select will pop up and serve as a representation of how you look. In my opinion, the quality and diversity in these portraits is absolutely fantastic. Anshar Studios took the time not just to provide different genders and races, but also completely different styles. So in the top section, you're going to have a more straight-laced noir look. The middle section provides a more alternative look, and the bottom section gives you a more sci-fi aesthetic. I think it's especially cool that not just black and white races are represented, but also Asian, and I feel like some of these faces could probably pass for Hispanic. Clearly, a great deal of effort was put into making sure you can represent your character exactly the way you want to. In addition to choosing an avatar, there are pronoun options to decide what NPC should use when referencing you. Your choices are either he, him, or she, her. In my main review, I mentioned it seemed odd they would include this option, but not allow you to be non-binary. In hindsight though, they probably don't let you choose that option because it would create a sizable writing expense trying to reword dialogue exchanges to fit that particular characterization. Where I think the game truly flounders as far as representation is in its treatment of women. I want to start this off by saying I am not in any way a prude or someone who gets squeamish when consuming grim content. On the contrary, I enjoy entertainment more when it is clearly not meant for children. That being said, I don't like the way this game handles sexual assault or sexual slavery. It's difficult to be specific without giving away spoilers, so I'll just say how Gamedec deals with the topics is something I feel like I have seen dozens of times in other mediums. How it's presented is not egregiously disrespectful towards women, so much as it feels like lazy writing. I don't use the word lazy lightly. I know people work very hard on these games, but I think most of you probably know what I am talking about. Content creators will throw in a sexual assault as a way to make something more edgy because they cannot be bothered to think of anything else. It is strange to see a premise that feels so original paired with story mechanics that have been grinded into the ground. I've seen other properties that tackle these topics in a way that really moves the narrative forward and makes you much more interested in what you are experiencing. I do not believe Gamedec accomplishes this. The NPCs you converse with are just as diverse as the portraits you can choose from. They are different races, gay and straight, and many of them have really interesting personalities that make dialogue highly enjoyable. The flip side of this is the power dynamics in Gamedec feel very conventional. If somebody is being abused, held against their will, or is desperately in need of help, it's probably a woman. Same deal if you are speaking to someone with an avatar that is highly sexualized and suggestive. If a person speaks with authority and has a position of real power, it's almost certainly a white man. One case you investigate is located in a virtual world based entirely on feudal Japan, and it is run by, you guessed it, 3 white people. Having this framework in a game that is 200 years in the future and for the most part set in virtual reality just doesn't make any sense to me. There are no romances in the game for your character. You can flirt with a couple of NPCs in a heterosexual or LGBTQIA+ fashion, but no full romances and no sexual situations that you directly interact with. There are NPCs in hetero and non-heterosexual relationships, but in general, sexual identity and sexuality is not a focal point of the game. To wrap this up, I would like to keep things in perspective. Most games don't allow you to play as a woman. Many games pretend black people and non-white people in general do not exist. Most games do not give you an opportunity to interact with a diverse group of characters. From a diversity standpoint, I think there's a lot of good in this game, and I personally enjoyed my time with it. There are clearly some opportunities for improvement, but not to the degree that I wouldn't play a sequel to this game or something else Anshar Studios does. I would love to hear your feedback. Please let me know your thoughts down below, whether you agree with me or believe there's an opportunity for improvement in my future commentary. Hopefully there's enough information here and in my overall review of the game that you can make your own decision about whether or not Gamedec is worth your time. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like down below, share this content, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.